They called her Lot 13, the last Omega, Wolfless, they said, Scentless, curse-marked. They said it like it was a medical condition or a warning on a package, or a reason no one needed to feel guilty about what happened next. The Bloodmoon Auction was held in the ruins of a church that had not been holy for 100 years. The blood moon bled red through the broken glass overhead. It fell on the quartz-veined floor, on the masked nobles, on the cages below the stage, that no one looked at directly, because looking required acknowledgement, and no one had come here to be responsible. The auctioneer moved through lot after lot with the efficiency of a man who believed his work was a service. Elara stood in the holding corridor, and she listened. She listened to the prices, and the silences before the prices, and the laughter when a price was low. She had learned, in the years since she was taken from her first pack, that the quality of a room's laughter told you exactly what the room valued. The people in that hall laughed away. People laughed when something disgusting was also amusing, which meant they had never expected to be the thing that someone else found disgusting. The door opened. A girl was being pushed toward the stage. She was small, younger than she should have been in any room, let alone this one. The auctioneer's assistant had his hand on her arm. The girl's feet were dragging. The auctioneer had decided a different face would be more profitable for the final lot. Elara stepped out of the shadows. Her hands were shaking and her throat was dry, and the silver chains on her wrists had been there long enough that the marks had stopped bleeding and started becoming permanent. But she stepped out. She said hoarsely, "I am Lot 13. Don't bring her up." The assistant looked at her. The auctioneer looked at her. The girl looked at her with the expression of someone who had already decided that no one was going to help tonight and was trying to understand why the math had changed. The hall laughed. The auctioneer shrugged and took Elara by the chain instead. The girl was pushed back into the corridor. Elara had known that would happen. She had not done it because she expected a different outcome for herself. She had done it because someone had to decide that the girl did not get sold tonight, and no one else in the corridor was making that decision. She walked onto the stage. The blood moon was very bright from up here. "Lot 13, the auctioneer announced, with the enthusiasm of a man reciting a warning rather than a selling point. "The last Omega, Wolfless, Scentless, curse-marked." A pack returned her twice. She has not shifted in 11 years. Starting bid is 1 silver. 1 silver. Not a gold, not a negotiating price. 1 silver, the cost of a loaf of bread, the value placed on 11 years of a person's life. The auctioneer smiled at the floor. If no one bids, she goes to the silver furnace. The house cannot store what cannot sell. Elara stood on the stage and looked at the single silver coin the auctioneer had placed in front of her. She had heard of the silver furnace. She had heard of what it did to Omega bloodlines they couldn't track or sell or use. She thought, if this is the last thing that is true about me, I refuse to let it be that I was worth less than bread. She raised her head. She looked out at the masked faces. And that was when the doors opened. The Alpha King did not announce himself. He did not need to. The room changed the moment he entered it, the way barometric pressure changes before a storm, a full-body understanding that something large and inevitable had just entered the space. Kael Draven stood in the entrance of the ruined church with his silver-edged coat and the absolute stillness of a man who had already decided what was going to happen and was simply waiting for the room to catch up. He looked at Elara. He looked at the single silver coin on the stage. He said, "I'll buy her." The hall went quiet. The auctioneer recovered first. He understood the mechanics of the situation. The Alpha King, which was unusual, but money was money, and if the king wanted the last lot, the house would take his coin and record the transaction and ask no questions. He reached out to take the bag Kael's guard had placed on the stage. The moment his hands closed around the leather, the coins inside began to glow. Each one had a mark pressed into the metal that was unmistakably the royal seal of Dravenmore, not decorative, active, the kind of mark that recorded every hand it passed through. The auctioneer let go. His hands were already luminescent. Already witnessed, Kael said, with the quiet precision of a man who had been planning this for a long time. The gold was not payment, it was evidence. Every coin bears the royal seal, and every hand that touched it tonight has just been named in a royal tribunal record. He looked at the masked faces in the seats. You are welcome to leave. You will find my men at every exit. The hall did not erupt. It collapsed, slowly, the way things collapsed, when people were too frightened to react quickly. Kael walked to the stage. He stood before Elara. His wolf. She would learn later that his name was Riven, that he had never bowed to anyone, that he had the kind of pride that was ancestral and non-negotiable, went still inside him. Then Riven knelt. The wolf of Kael Draven had walked battlefields without lowering his head to any of them. He had stood in the presence of 3 elder alphas who outranked his host by bloodline and had not moved. He had been present when the moon goddess herself had sent an emissary, and he had remained upright through it on the principle that he was royal wolf of the Dravenmoor line, and that was worth something. He looked at the girl on the stage. He knelt. It was not a dramatic display. It was something quieter and more absolute. The Alpha King's wolf simply recognized what was standing in front of him and could not remain upright in the presence of it. Elara heard something inside her skull, a voice that was not hers, or perhaps it had always been hers, buried so deeply under silver and years and silence that she had forgotten its register. It said, "Queen." She took a step back. Kael reached for the chains on her wrists, and she flinched. He stopped immediately. He said, "I paid a price to stop the auction, not to own you." He waited. She did not move. He said, "If you allow it, I will take the chains off. If you would rather keep them until you're somewhere safer, I understand that too. But I'm not taking anything from you tonight. You've had enough taken." She looked at him. At the wolf that had knelt. Riven had bowed to no alpha, no council, no crown forged in any living king's memory. But before Elara, the king's wolf had lowered his head like he had recognized a queen before the kingdom did. At the coins that were still glowing on the stage, she extended her wrists. He removed the chains without touching her skin. Dravenmoor Palace was made of pale stone and old ambitions. Elara was brought through a side entrance, past guards who looked at her with the careful blankness of people who had been trained not to have visible opinions about the Alpha King's decisions. In the main hall, she encountered Lady Seraphine. Seraphine was everything a future Luna was supposed to be. She stood with the posture of someone who had been practicing posture since childhood. She wore the formal colors of the High Council. She had a smile that was deployed with surgical precision. She said, "Your Majesty, since when does auction inventory enter through the royal wing?" Kael said, "She is not inventory." He said it without looking at Seraphine. "The palace will learn that. If anyone here requires additional instruction, I am available." Seraphine's smile did not move. Her eyes did. She watched Elara the way a person watched something that threatened a very long project. Elara was shown to a room that was larger than any space she had slept in since childhood. There was a bed and food on a small table and a fire that was not being used as punishment. She did not know what to do with any of it. She had been in houses where comfort was conditional, where accepting something meant owing something, where the price of a warm room was discovered later and always cost more than the room. She stood in the center of the floor. She waited. When nothing happened, she sat down against the wall under the window. Later, she heard the door open. She did not look up. Footsteps, a pause, the sound of something being set down gently on the floor near her. A blanket folded, a glass of water, a piece of bread. The footsteps moved back to the door. Kael said, from the threshold, "I won't tell you where to sleep in a room that is yours to use, but I'll leave these here in case they're useful." He left. Elara looked at the blanket and the bread and the water for a long time. Then she picked up the bread. Healer Mara had the manner of someone who had decided, at some point in the past, that honesty was less complicated than managing other people's expectations. She had treated too many Omegas, whose bodies had been edited by people who called cruelty a diagnosis. She looked at Elara's wrists and said nothing for a long moment. Then she uncapped a small bottle of moonwater and applied a drop to the longest silver burn. The skin lit up, not warmly. The light was red-white, the color of something that had been suppressed for a very long time, and was now trying to surface through a barrier that had been built to hold it down. A scent came with it, very faint, like white flowers in night rain. Present for perhaps 3 seconds, and then sealed shut again. So fast it was almost possible to believe it hadn't happened. Elara made a sound she hadn't planned to make. Mara set down the bottle. "Silver ash," she said. "It's been layered in at least 3 times. Someone wanted this suppression to hold." She looked at Elara directly. "You are not wolfless. You were made to present as wolfless. Those are completely different things." Elara sat with that. She had been told since she was 9 years old that she was broken. Not in those words, always. Sometimes it was clinical. No wolf response, no scent signature, no useful bloodline output. Sometimes it was practical. She couldn't be used for pack defense, couldn't shift, couldn't contribute what an Omega was supposed to contribute. Sometimes it was just the way people looked at her when they thought she wasn't watching. The specific expression of someone who had paid for something and was realizing the thing did not function as advertised. She said, "I have gone 11 years believing." "I know," Risa said. "That is what it was designed to do." Something that had been load-bearing in Elara's understanding of herself shifted. She said quietly, "I'm not worthless. I was made to seem worthless." Mara said, "Yes, which means someone needed you to be quiet about something you carry." When the moonwater dried, Mara leaned in and noted something on the inner side of Elara's neck. A mark so faint it was barely visible, like a watermark in old paper. She said nothing in front of the guards, but later, when it was just her and Kael, she showed him the mark. Kael looked at it for a long time. He said, "Malrek has been looking for Bloodmoon bloodline for 8 years. He understood then precisely how much danger Elara was in, and he made his first mistake. The mistake was the guards at her door. He placed them there that night, 2 of his most trusted men, outside her corridor, with orders not to let anyone approach without his direct authorization. He told himself it was protection. He told himself it was necessary. He told himself that Malrek had agents in the palace, and Elara had no idea how to recognize them. All of those things were true. They were also beside the point. The next morning, Elara stood in the hall and looked at the guards outside her door, and she said nothing for a long moment. Then she said, "The auction house used silver chains. You use locked doors. What is the difference?" He had been standing near enough to hear. He was quiet. She looked at him. She said, "I know you think you're protecting me. I know the difference between men who want to cage something and men who think they're keeping something safe. But from where I'm standing, the door still doesn't open from the inside." He dismissed the guards. He said, "I don't know how to protect someone without controlling the space around them. That's the honest answer. I've been doing it one way my whole life, and I don't have a better method yet." He said, "But I'll learn." She watched him. He said, "I'll put them at the end of the corridor instead. You won't see them unless you need them." It was not a perfect solution. It was the answer of a man who was actually trying. She said, "That's better." The council session was held the following day. The elders framed the Bloodmoon auction as a political liability problem. They did not mention the women who had been sold. Kael said, "The women who were sold are the matter." An elder began, "There are considerations of bloodline." "Say that clearly," Kael said. "I want the record to reflect it." The elder did not finish the sentence, but then they turned to Elara, who had been brought in at Kael's insistence. One of the High Council, in his formal silver robes, looked at her and said, "Given her curse mark and her origins, the council will require her to kneel as a demonstration of, 'I have knelt enough.'" She had not planned to say it loudly, but it came out at volume, and the room heard it, and the room went very still. She said, "I have knelt in front of pack leaders who didn't deserve it. I have knelt in auction houses I have knelt in transit wagons. I have knelt on cold stone floors in other people's houses while they decided what to do with me. I will not kneel in the palace of the man who took my chains off. She looked at the elder directly. If you need someone to prove they are not a threat, look at the men who built the auction, not at the women they sold. The council did not approve, but no one made her kneel. Lord Malrek Voss was a patient man. He had been running the Bloodmoon Auction for 11 years, and the operation had never simply been a marketplace. It had been a sorting room, and every figure in his network understood what they were sorting for. The auctions moved Omegas with unrecognized bloodlines into households that would never examine them closely. The silver ash suppressed scent, wolf, and magical signature until what remained was a perfectly unremarkable domestic asset. But Malrek had spent 8 years looking for the last of the Bloodmoon Luna line. Malrek had never run an auction. He had run a sorting room for bloodlines the crown might one day remember, and now the crown had found her first. He met with Seraphine in a room that did not appear in the palace records. Seraphine was not a vain woman, which was something people misunderstood about her. She had not been prepared for the role of Luna out of vanity. She had been prepared for it out of conviction, because the council had told her, her entire life, that Luna was a political position held by women of appropriate bloodline, proper education, documented heritage, and proven loyalty to the system that granted all of those things. If Elara, an auction Omega with a suppressed wolf and a curse mark, could be Luna simply by carrying old blood, then everything that had been done to make Seraphine ready for the role was meaningless. She said, I want her gone, not dead. Gone. Malrek said, That's the wrong order of operations, he said. The Bloodmoon crown can't be opened by force. It requires the willing bloodline. If we can bring the girl to the crown before she understands what she carries, she won't know to refuse. He said, I only need one night, and I need the west corridor. Seraphine looked at him for a long time. She had spent her life being prepared for a throne that was being taken from her by a girl who had been sold for 1 coin. She gave him the access code. That night, Elara heard a sound from the lower hall. She recognized the source before she understood it consciously, the small, frightened breathing of someone very young who was trying not to be heard. One of the Omega girls who had been rescued from the auction had been moved to the palace holding quarters. The girl from the corridor. Malrek's people had found her. Elara had a choice. The east stairway was clear. She had memorized the layout in the 2 days she'd been here, because knowing exits was a survival habit that had never stopped being useful. She could have been out of the building and into the city before anyone reached her. She went toward the sound instead. She got the girl out of the room before she felt the air change behind her. She turned around. Malrek's men were waiting. The guards assigned to that corridor had not been defeated. They had been reassigned by an order that carried Seraphine's seal. She was taken quickly and without particular cruelty, because Malrek had instructed them that the blood had to be in usable condition. As they bound her hands, she heard one of them say into a communication device, "Assets secured, crown room ready." She filed that phrase away. She had learned from 11 years of being moved between places against her will that the people who moved you always said more than they intended. She knew she had been taken back to the auction house before she opened her eyes. The stone was wrong under her back. She recognized the particular cold of a surface that had absorbed centuries of bad decisions. She was on the stage again. The blood moon was overhead again. The masked figures were arranged again. But there was no auctioneer. There was no bidding. There was a stone altar where the podium had been, and on it sat the Bloodmoon crown, a piece of ancient silver that pulsed with cold light as if it had been waiting a very long time to be relevant. Malrek stood at the altar. He said, "The crown doesn't need a queen. It only needs the right blood." He cut her palm. He pressed it to the crown. The crown lit up, and then it did nothing. It did not move to him. It did not acknowledge him. It sat there blazing with cold light, completely indifferent to the man who was trying to command it. Malrek's composure cracked for the first time. He said, "Why isn't it?" The doors broke. Kael came through them with 4 of his guard, and the expression of a man who had spent 30 minutes finding the right entrance to the right room under the right ruined church and was done tolerating obstacles. He fought toward the stage. Malrek seized the crown chain attached to Elara's wrist, a silver link that connected her blood to the crown. He said, "One more step and the chain goes tight. You know what silver does to bloodline seals." Kael stopped. Riven raged inside him, wanting to take the room apart at the molecular level. He held. Every instinct he had, the alpha instincts, the protective instincts, the 11 years of being the person who ended threats, was telling him to move. Riven was not kneeling now. Riven was a coiled, barely contained certainty that the man with the chain needed to be removed from this situation immediately and permanently. Kael held both of them, his wolf, his rage, his need to fix this the fast way. He thought about what Elara had said to him 3 days ago. The auction house uses silver chains. You use locked doors. He thought about what it meant to be the kind of man who could not protect someone without controlling the space around them. He thought about whether he was capable of being something else. He looked at Elara. Elara looked at him. He said, "I can destroy this room. I can kill everyone in it. But I cannot take back your right to choose if I do it wrong." He went down on one knee. The Alpha King of Draven, in the ruin of the church that had been selling Omega women for a decade, knelt in front of the girl who had been sold for 1 silver coin. "Tell me what you want," he said. "I'll follow your lead." Riven bowed his head. The hall was absolutely silent. Elara looked at the crown. She looked at the silver ash burns on her wrists that had never fully healed. She had spent 11 years being told there was nothing inside her worth finding. She reached inward. Not for the version of herself that had survived by being small and quiet and unthreatening. Not for the part that had learned to read the laughter of rooms and not be the thing they laughed at. She reached for the thing that had been in the silence under all of that. The silver ash in her wrists ignited, not in the way it had hurt before, the low constant suppression, the way it had felt like breathing through wet cloth for a decade. It burned clean and fast, and then it was ash, and then it was nothing, and the nothing felt like having a window opened in a room that had been sealed shut. A scent rose from her, white flowers in night rain, and something older under that, something that had been growing toward light for 11 years in the dark. Her wolf came back. She-wolf, moon-pale, with eyes the red of old bloodlines, and the steady regard of something that had been waiting. The chain on her wrist dissolved. She stood. She walked to the crown. She said to Malrek, who was backing away, "My blood is not your key. It is my verdict." She placed her hand on the crown. The Bloodmoon crown rose. It did not go to the strongest alpha in the room. It did not go to the man who had tried hardest to possess it. It settled above Elara's head with the finality of something returning to where it had always belonged. The blood moon blazed. The light fell on every masked face in the hall, and as it did, the masks became transparent, not literally, but functionally. Names appeared on the stone walls in characters of cold light. The crown did not invent them. It forced the room to read what the auction had already recorded. Every transaction, every Omega sold, every noble family that had paid to participate, to receive, to keep silent. "You think a crown can judge me?" Malrek said. Elara looked at him. "No," she said, "I can." Malrek was bound by the blood oath he had made when he pressed Elara's palm to the crown. The oath had recorded his intention. It did not allow him to walk away from the record of it. Seraphine's name appeared on the wall. She had not sold anyone, but she had opened the door. Elara stepped down from the altar and crossed the hall. On the stage where she had stood as Lot 13, a single silver coin had been left, either by accident or by the kind of cosmic irony that tended to appear at significant moments. She picked it up. She crushed it under her heel. From below the stage, through the grating in the floor, she heard movement. She went to the grating and opened it. The Omega women who had been kept in the holding cells, The ones who had not been sold tonight, the ones the auction had been warehousing for the next event, looked up at her. She said, "Come up. You are done being kept underground." They came. 3 days later, the Bloodmoon Auction was formally closed by royal decree. The evidence from the royal seal coins, combined with the wall records produced by the crown and the testimony of the surviving women, produced a tribunal docket that the council had no legal mechanism to suppress. Malrek was taken to stand trial. Seraphine's titles were suspended pending a full investigation. She did not disappear. She would stand in her own trial, in her own time, and answer for the door she had opened. Seraphine had not been erased. She had been recorded. Elara had asked that it be done in sequence and on record, not in the dark. The Omega women were housed in the west wing of Dravenmore Palace. Their options were assessed, and their families, those who could be found, those who wanted to be found, were contacted. The girl from the corridor slept in a room 3 doors down from Elara's. She had stopped flinching at doors. On the 4th night, Elara stood on the balcony under the blood moon. Kael stood beside her. Not close. He had been very careful about close, in the way of a person who had understood that closeness required permission and was not going to take it. Elara said, "You have not asked," he said. "About what?" She said, "About what comes next." The council has been sending messages about the Luna ceremony, about the throne, about blood moon stability, which is a phrase they use when they mean they want to settle things politically as quickly as possible. Kael said, "I know." She said, "You haven't told them anything." He said, "The throne can wait." "So can I." She looked at him. She had not had many experiences with power, choosing to wait for something it could simply have taken. She extended her hand toward him, slowly, not as a claim, as an offering. She said, "I do not belong to you, Kael Draven." He said, "I know." She said, "But I choose to stand next to you." He took her hand, not the way someone took what was theirs, the way someone accepted something they had not expected to be given. Below them, in the courtyard, a small shape moved through the moonlight. The girl from the corridor, running. Not running away. Running because she could, in an open space, with no chains on her wrists. Running because no one had told her not to. Under the blood moon, the girl they had sold for 1 coin became the queen no kingdom could command. She had not been saved. She had been given 1 clear night to save herself. And she had chosen, when the chains were off, and the crown was hers, and no one was deciding for her, to remain. Not because she had nowhere else to go, because here, for the first time, was a place that would wait for her to choose.